Welcome to the Songwriter Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Vidala, and we're going to talk about music theory, lyric writing, creative productivity, inspiration, and more. I'm super excited to have you here, so let's dive into the episode. Hey friend, last time we talked through how to figure out any major key with one rule. And I figured a natural follow-up to that is, well, let's do the minor keys too. And there's a lot of different modes and other things that you can do with minor keys, which is also true of major keys. There's so much more than just the basic major key and then the three minor keys we're going to cover today. There are things called modes, and that's the sort of stuff I'm sure we'll get into eventually. But my goal here is to give you the music theory that you really need early on, and the music theory that is most important first. And of course, over time, we'll have time to really dive into things that maybe aren't so, I don't want to say important, but aren't used quite as often. It might not be quite as useful to you. So for today, we are going to talk through the natural minor, the harmonic minor, and the melodic minor. And these three are the same as the major key in the same way that any natural, harmonic, or melodic minor, all of them will have the same steps between them. So once you memorize what these steps are, if somebody says A natural minor or C natural minor, you will be able to figure out everything from there. And also, like last time, in the show notes or in whatever the documentation is called in your app, I will have a link to the specific blog post that goes along with this. Because there's going to be some helpful images in there. It will be helpful to look over. I really recommend, if you can, possibly listening while you read it, but or while looking at it at least. But if you can't, that's totally fine. And if you have any confusion left after the podcast and you kind of need to see it, I definitely recommend checking out the blog later when you get a chance. So let's just jump in. We got the natural minor first, and the natural minor, no matter what natural minor it is, always has these steps: a whole step, a half step, a whole step, another whole step, a half step, a whole step, and another whole step to finish us out. Now, if you weren't here last time and you're wondering, okay, but what on earth is a half step? What's a whole step? I don't know what that means. A half step is the same thing as a semitone, okay? And a half step, also known as a semitone, is basically the smallest interval that we have here in Western music. So if you look at a piano, for instance, a semitone or half step is always going to be just the next note. So from C to C sharp to D sharp to E, all of those are semitones. All of those are half steps. And a whole step is just two half steps. So a whole step is two semitones. So that just means you're going up two notes. So that's all that means. So again, the natural minor is a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step, and then a whole step. So for example, in the key of C, in this case, the C natural minor, we start at C. So we start at C, and then we take a whole step over D flat to D, and then a half step to E flat, and then a whole step over E to F, because there is no E sharp, which sounds like that. Not E sharp sounds like that, that's the F. And then a whole step over G flat to G, a half step to A flat, a whole step over A to B flat, and then a whole step over B back to C. So altogether it sounds like this. So that is the natural minor. So from there, the harmonic minor has only one difference in it from the natural minor. Only one difference. And the only difference is that the seventh of the scale, so in the key of C, the B would be the seventh, right? Is raised, meaning it's up one more semitone. So as we just went over in the key of C, natural minor, we have a B flat. So we have C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, back to C. So that B flat, the seventh, right? Because if you count up, that's the seventh, will be raised by a semitone. So the B flat is going to become a B. Now for steps, that means that now we have a whole step, half step, whole step, half step, just like the natural minor in this harmonic minor. But now, instead of a whole step, we have an augmented second. So a whole step is 2 semitones, an augmented second is 3 semitones. And in a future podcast, and I'm already writing the blog for this one, we are going to talk about all the different intervals, and in that we're going to cover augmented second and other awesome stuff like that. So make sure to stay tuned, and hey, subscribe if you haven't, so that you make sure to catch that. So again, the seventh is raised in a harmonic minor. So the easiest way to remember this is if you can memorize the natural minor, the seventh is raised for the harmonic minor. It's the only difference. The other way to remember it is before that final step back to the root note, in this case C, because we're talking about the C minor scales, is normally, it was a whole step for the natural minor. So the natural minor closed us out with a whole step and then a whole step. But the harmonic minor, the last 2 steps, is going to be an augmented second and then a half step. But the easiest way to remember it is definitely memorize the natural minor. And then for the harmonic minor, just think, hey, the seventh is raised. The seventh is 1 note higher than it was before. So to go over it using C again, we have the first 6 notes, of course, are the same as the natural minor. So we got C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, and then instead of B flat, we're going to go all the way to B, and then back to C. So altogether, it should sound like this. Sort of has more of an exotic sound to it. Almost an Egyptian sound, just a little bit. I definitely like to use this one a lot more so, especially when it comes to some rock music, especially if it's in a like Breaking Benjamin kind of style. I just really like how it works. But all it is the seventh raised from the natural minor. And then the last one we're going to talk about, perhaps the most interesting, is the melodic minor. So what's interesting about this one is depending on whether you're ascending, going up the scale, or descending, it actually is different, which is interesting. So descending, meaning when you're going down, it's actually the exact same as the natural minor. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So descending is the exact same as the natural minor, which was the first one we learned. So far, for these 3 minor keys, you'll note that all you really need to memorize so far is that natural minor whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And then if you can remember, for the harmonic minor, you're going to just raise the seventh. So instead of the last 2 whole steps, you're going to have an augmented second and then a half step. And then for this melodic minor, on the way down, it just is the natural minor. But on the way up, it is a little different. So on the way up, ascending, it's a whole step, a half step, a whole step. So those are the same so far, right? We've always started with the whole step, and then next a half step, and then another whole step. And then we always have a whole step, and then this is where it starts to get different. So when we're ascending for the melodic minor, we start with whole step, half step, whole step, and then another whole step, followed by another whole step, and then a half step. So what that is going to sound like in C is we're going to start with C, of course, because this is C melodic minor. And then we're going to take a whole step over D flat to D, same as usual. And then we're going to take that half step to E flat, as usual. And then a whole step over E to F, as usual. And a whole step over G flat to G, as usual. And now a whole step over A flat to A. So this is the first time we've gone to A here instead of A flat. And then a whole step over B flat to B. And then a half step back to C. So altogether it's going to sound like this going up for a melodic minor. And then down, of course, we are going back to the way that we did the natural minor. So from there, we'd go down like this. So that one's definitely the most interesting for remembering, because depending on whether you're going up or down, it's going to be different. So just remember that going down is the same as the natural minor. So your natural minor that you memorize, that whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So one whole, one half, two wholes, one half, and then two wholes. If you remember that, again, that's the natural minor. And then raise the seventh, which means that instead of a whole step and a whole step at the end, it's going to be an augmented second and a half step. I know I'm repeating this a lot. Hopefully that's going to help you remember it. And then for this melodic minor, on the way down, it's back to just regular natural minor. And then what you need to memorize is that melodic minor with the whole step, half step, whole step as usual, and then whole step, half step. So if you can remember these things, which is mostly just that natural minor, because the natural minor is the harmonic minor, except you raise the seventh. And then the natural minor is the same for the melodic minor if you're going down. So really the three things you got to memorize is the natural minor steps, the ascending melodic minor steps, and that for the harmonic minor, you got to raise the seventh from what you've already memorized. And for the melodic minor, the way down is the same as the natural minor. I know it's a little bit of memorization. It's not necessarily imperative that you memorize this. It's good to know it for sure, but memorizing it helps because no matter what scenario you're in, you'll always be able to figure it out. If for some reason your band director or something says, and you don't have sheet music in front of you, hey, this is in C melodic minor, do you know what that means? You know, it's great to have those memorized straight up, but if you don't, you can be like, all right, let's figure it out though, because I know the steps that are in the natural minor and the harmonic minor and the melodic minor. Thanks for listening to the Songwriter Theory Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and tell a friend. If you want to jumpstart your songwriting, be sure to download my free guide on 10 proven ways to start writing a song at songwritertheory.com/free guide.